Looks good here.
Okay. I don't know if I can share my screen and admit people at the same time though, so. Let me see. I don't know if that works or not. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and once I pass it off, the presenter off, I can admit more people.
Sounds good.
Okay. Unless someone knows how to do that.
No.
I think you'd have to make someone else co-host.
Yeah, I'm like a whiz at Teams. There we go. Okay, Tom, I made you a co-host. That helps.
Okay.
Who do we want to present from the developers group to? I can do that right now, and then we don't have to deal with this.
You can make me Eric Reschke.
Okay. Make co-host. All right. Good stuff.
Okay. It looks like you got it recording. Sounds good.
All right, so I guess welcome everyone, to the Southside Slopes Association Development Activities Meeting. I'm Brad Palmasino, a board member, at least in the short term, and I'll be co-facilitating this meeting along with Thomas Sharef, a planner at the Department of City of Pittsburgh. So we'll walk through the agenda real quick. If you're having any technical problems, use the Q&A tool and ask for help, and we'll make sure you're able to hear and see the presentation. All right, so that's welcome. There's a little bit of an agenda. We're talking briefly about the Registered Community Organization Program, a little bit about the Slopes Association, how to participate, an overview of the project, and then we'll talk through some next steps going forward. So the Registered Community Organizations, just so you understand the context here, through the Department of City Planning, the Slopes Association has become that. And so what happens is when applicants go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, Historic Review Commission, Art Commission must contact the RCO and schedule this development activities meeting, which is basically sets us as the conduit between the community and an applicant who wants to go before any of those boards. So again, this provides the opportunity to learn about the proposal and a way for to facilitate community feedback. We were approved as an RCO in July of 2020. What triggers a development activities meeting? This list of things, basically any sort of large scale project in the community that isn't sort of single family residential. So you can see the list of things that would trigger a development activities meeting. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about specifically what the applicants are requesting as we go through their presentation. All right, how to participate, presenters. I think you guys have done this before. We played this game before. And then after that, we'll let the presentations finish the presenters finish theirs. And then we'll use the Q&A tool for questions. And then as we have time, you will use the raise hand button and we can ask them, we can unmute you. And then if you have a voice call, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and we'll announce the last 4 digits and try to get everyone to call in that way. So this meeting, just as a reminder, will be recorded and is recorded and will be shared on the website. Quick brief overview of the Slopes Association. I think most of you know the Slopes Association has been around. Our focus is neighborhood unity, an advocacy liaison role to the city to promote public safety, housing, and beautification of the slopes. Additional comments you can share directly with the Slopes Association, info@southsideslopes.org. Sorry, this project will not present in front of the Art Commission. This will be in front of the Zoning Board. I forgot to update that. My apologies. Race and home from work. So to provide public comment, you can do testimony.
And Brad, I'll just sorry to interject. I can share the info for the
Info links on that. Yeah, be careful with those. Those might be old. And then for more information to stay in touch with the Southside Slopes, you can use any of these links to get in touch with us. So that is what I got. I will turn it over now. Thomas, I suppose you have some discussion?
Yes, yeah, let me pull that up. And here. Okay. All right. Can you see the development activities meeting coming through? Okay.
Yep.
Great. Yes, so some of this, so I'm Thomas Scharf. I serve as the neighborhood planner for the South Side Slopes with the Department of City Planning, City of Pittsburgh. So I'll run through quickly some of this stuff. Brad, you covered. Thank you so much for your great presentation. So yes, the development activities meetings are a space for the formal channeling and community input on development projects. As Brad was mentioning, there's specific development thresholds when those are met, and there's by development, and it's also going to one of the 4 boards or commissions mentioned. Then there's a DAM required development activities meeting. The one note is that a development activities meeting has to happen at least 30 days prior to the public hearing, when there's like an action, official action at the public hearing. So in this case, the applicant team can get more into it, but as from what I understand, for example, one of the requests going to the zoning board of adjustment is a use variance. So this hits that threshold, and will be, so this going to the zoning board of adjustment, that triggers the DAM. This project an earlier version of this project did go to a DAM about a year ago. And because there was significant enough change in this new iteration, it's coming back to a DAM, and will be going back to the ZBA. So here is the information for zoning board of adjustment. So to provide public comment, you can directly join their public meetings. Those you can join by Zoom, use raise hand function to request to speak. You can join by phone, use the *9 raise hand function. To confirm that you can get some time on their agenda to comment during their ZBA hearing, you're encouraged to email zoningboard@pittsburghpa.gov. And that way the staff for the ZBA can help reserve that time for you. To follow the ZBA, you can go to pittsburghpa.gov/DCP/ZBA. And they also, the ZBA agendas, presentations, project information should be posted on pittsburghpa.gov/DCP/notices. So that's the kind of the core info. If you can also email written testimony to zoning board@pittsburghpa.gov. But I think to be guaranteed that it's kind of heard by the ZBA, the staff recommend that you actually attend the ZBA hearing and participate in the way that's shown here on this slide. So that's the main rundown. I have other slides here on the other commissions, but tonight those don't apply in this specific application. If you'd like to follow us for Pittsburgh City Planning, here's some of the on the social media sites. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Brad, and then to the applicant team.
Okay, thanks. I guess I will turn it over to Eric Reschke, who is with Abode Realty, and he can give his overview of give the presentation of the project. You should be able to share your screen. If you need someone else to share, let me know, and I can give them the ability to do so.
I can do that. Let me see. Share screen. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Pick our project. We good?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all for coming to take a review of the project that we're going to be presenting today. We're actually going to call this now, going forward, the 46 Pius Street project. We've consolidated the lots that we have acquired from in 32 Pius and 44 Pius. So technically our new name will be 46 Pius. So there you go. I just want to start to go through a little bit of the background, but as Thomas said, we had been at this meeting last year to go through the project and are excited to kind of give you an updated version of what we've been able to continue to work on. It's been a long year of work, and a lot of hard work has gone into this. But right now we are we're going to be making some fairly cosmetically significant changes, but in our view, it's really not going to change the project overall at all. So let's see what's going to go happen here. Go to the next page. So the project that we're talking about is to build a multifamily apartment building on the south side slopes on Pius Street. We purchased the 2 lots last year. Previously, our plan envisioned us to renovate both the 32 and 44 Pius Street buildings, built in the late 19th century. The ZBA approved our proposal to do that, to have multifamily in the slopes in the Hillside District. Last year, we also had a variance for having 2 walls less than 10 feet apart. That's going to be the original stone wall along Pius Street, along with a new short wall that's going to be holding up some of the parking that we're going to be putting in front of the buildings. It's been a long year of investigation and understanding about how the project is going to go. The 44 Pius Street building, which is the former theater, was really in bad shape, is really in bad shape, and continues to deteriorate. That with exponentially rising construction costs and financing costs, we're going to be submitting a revised plan to demolish the 44 Pius Street structure and replace it basically in the same place with a very similar structure, which will marry nicely with the bedrock of the 32 Pius Street as the anchor piece to the project. So, as I said, this is, the project is, the things that are unchanged is really the footprint. The 2.3 acre site is going to be unchanged. 32 Pius is really going to be our anchor to the project. It's going to, we're going to retain its historic exterior and restore it and maintain it in a beautiful fashion. The site access is going to change. The grading and parking that we had previously discussed is going to change. The existing walls behind Pius Street are not going to change.
Not going to change on site.
Sorry, not going to change. The site access is not going to change. The height of the new building would not change. It's going to be the same height as the existing 44 Pius, actually slightly shorter. The impact of this project will continue to be basically the same or less than the project was when it was previously used as a school. And the critical part, the parking for the residential units is going to meet or exceed the parking requirements for the project as defined by the code. So what's going to change is that we're going to be looking to demolish the 44 Pius Street structure. We worked really, really hard. We stabilized the site. We worked to look very closely with our architect, Desmone, Eric Booth, who's on, and we'll talk to this in a little bit, to see what we could do to retain this structure. It's very structurally compromised. I'm sure everyone on this call has seen it fall further into disrepair over the past couple of years. Previously it had been looked for demolition. So it's not like it's something that we can easily recover from. And we, along with the increased costs, have realized that it's not a practical place for us to be able to renovate that project. The new footprint will be the same, and the building will be the same height, basically, than the 66 Pius, which is right next door, the condominium building. The demolition of this is really going to allow us to use 32 in a more effective fashion, and also have a more efficient layout for 44 Pius, or the new building that we would be building. And we would also be able to put parking spaces inside the building. So we'd be able to increase our on-site parking fairly significantly. It's going to, based upon what we had previously submitted to the Southside Slopes last year, this is going to be about 15 units bigger than what we had presented last year. We're looking for 2 variances from the ZBA when we go to them. The volume of disturbance, because we'd be demolishing this building, we're going to be looking to look for a variance of the 50% of the site variance. It's really kind of an anomaly in the code where just because we happen to be removing a building and rebuilding, it's still considered disturbance, even though it's all been previously disturbed. And finally, the hillside, the multifamily in the hillside district, which is the one that we had already received. The variance would continue the 2 walls that are less than 10 feet apart. That variance has already been granted. You know, like I said, we've worked really, it's been an 18-month effort for us to try to work through the project to see if we can make this happen with the existing structures. And it's just really not structurally or economically viable for us to be able to pursue that. You know, that's the critical part here. Adding the additional units improves the building efficiency a little bit. It just makes the whole project economically viable and allows us to have adequate on-site parking, but still have the historic aesthetic of the site. So, you know, we have a great team on board. We've been working on this, like I said, 18 months, and we have Desmone as our lead architect. Art Booth has been an amazing advisor in terms of this. Tyson Miller, who many of you may know from KU Resources, has been intimately involved in site work in this area for, I'm going to say, almost a decade. Franjo has been selected as our general contractor. They do a lot of adaptive reuse projects, and we're very excited for them to be on board. And WBCM and Alan and Sharif are our structural and MEP. So I can talk just briefly the state of the site, and this is last year, so it's probably even worse. But these are the buildings are. This is 44 Pius. It's really quite dilapidated. We try to keep it as closed off as possible. We have visitors every once in a while. We continue to put up plywood to prevent people from visiting, but that's kind of a whack-a-mole process that we continue to work on. So you can kind of see what the state of the state is. And we've done a lot of structural review of the project. The building, while it's not going to fall over, it doesn't really lend itself to becoming a very viable multifamily structure. So with that, I think I'm going to, Eric, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eric. So I'm Eric Booth with Desmone. I presented to you guys last year. So I'm going to walk through the project. I'm going to focus mostly on what's changed, but I will kind of mention some sort of the major highlights from what it was before. So just kind of orient everyone. What you're looking at right here is an aerial view with Pius Street at the top there. And then so that yellow line is an outline of where basically the property lines are. And so that's kind of you see it's primarily over where the 32 and the 44 building are currently. And there's a little bit in front of the condo building. And then it also includes the parking lot right there to the right. Next slide. This is just another view of that. So this is kind of looking as an aerial. Again, to the right is the existing 32 Pius building. In the middle there is the 44. And then the condo building is right there, sort of in between the property portions. But you can see the additional kind of lot portion there on the left side there. Okay, so I'll spend some time on this one. So this is the overall master plan. So in this case, north is actually down. And so what we're looking at here is Pius is at the bottom of the screen. And then we have the 32 Pius building to the right. We have the new structure, which is we're proposing in the location of the 44 building. And then, of course, the Pius Street Lofts condo building right there to the left, and then the additional parking. So the way this has been for basically for the last year is essentially the same site. And it's designed so that the entrance for the parking would come in there on the left, and then it'll all be one way. And then so you'd have parking on the left side. You'll notice that that is actually closed off from the other street that comes through there. So this is just basically you kind of come in and out, and then cars would go to the front, and then the parking would be those diagonal spaces there to the right. And then there's a small lot over to the right side, which is where there's currently a lot, and then cars will then go down. So the total number of parking spaces there on the outside was, I believe, 68. Again, that's not changed from our previous version. The only thing that's changed, like we said, is essentially removing the 44 building and then replacing it with a new building. So if it's a little bit hard to see, but there's actually a dashed line on there in the center, which kind of shows the current outline of the existing building, at least sort of at the very bottom. In fact, actually, as the existing 44 building goes up the hill, it actually extends back to the hillside a little bit. And the dark shaded portion is the outline of the proposed building. Now, what I want to do, I want to point out that this is still schematic, or actually sort of conceptual. It's kind of an overall footprint, but the exact shape and so forth is still going to tweak, just a little bit. We kind of laid it out to be efficient, get an overall sense of masking and so forth. But we want to demonstrate that we're basically staying within the boundaries of the previous building. And that's significant for a number of reasons. One, to kind of maintain the massing, and two, also to avoid disturbance of the hillside. So we won't have to basically go and disturb the hillside, the retaining walls. We're essentially building within what had already been developed. The overall footprint is a little bit larger in terms of square footage than the previous building was, but it's still pretty comparable. And if you look really closely, the current 44 building actually extends out it's probably about a good 6 to 8 feet further than the 32 building. But the way we're proposing it right now is actually kind of hold that back to be more in line with the 32 structure. And next slide. So this is kind of an overall perspective. Again, this is still in the schematic stage, or the concept stage. So the exact kind of nuances and detailing of this will probably adjust somewhat. It will have to go through the whole design review process for the city. It'll have to go in front of CDAP now, whereas before we did not have to. So this will actually go through a design review. And so what you're looking at here is on the left side is the condo building, the existing structure. And then on the right side is existing 32 building, pretty much as it is right now. The only changes that we've been making to that are essentially to basically clean and repoint and actually remove some of the existing stairs and the awnings that are over there, but otherwise essentially retain it in terms of what it looks like currently. And then the new structure is basically conceived as being built out of brick, an entire brick front facade, and basically consistent with what the 44 building is and was. And then we also decided to kind of try to break down the masking of that. So it has it basically doesn't read as kind of one solid building all the way across. But really important to point out, and this will become obvious in some of the future slides, is that we're maintaining the height of the new building to essentially be the height of the existing 32 building, and also of the condo building. They're almost the same height, and so essentially we're retaining this height between those, and then we're actually allowed to do this, so we don't have to have any. This would basically be permitted by right under zoning. So we don't have to have any variances or special exceptions with regard to height. It's basically be allowed by right. And the same thing for the setbacks, because we're basically staying within the setbacks of the previous building and also staying within the setbacks with respect to the property lines. We don't have to have any adjustments or variances and so forth associated with any of the massing or any of the dimensional. And so the way this is conceived is that the ground portion of the existing 32 building would actually have units in it. But the ground level of the new building would actually have parking through most of it on the left side there, and then the entrance to the lobby and so forth on the right side. And then the units from that point would just be on the upper floors. One of the really good advantages of this, as Eric pointed out, is it's more efficient. The 44 building currently has, not only does it not have all the levels that are the same as the 32 building, they're all at various levels. They're all different, which required us to do ramping and different kind of situations with elevators. But this actually allows us to essentially line the two buildings up. So it's efficient. Basically, each floor would line up from one to the other between 32 and 44. And even though they're separate buildings, they would essentially be able to kind of function as one. And I think, as also Eric mentioned, in this case, whereas the previously the 44 and the 32 were kind of the features, because the 32 building has sort of more historic character, it also has a tower. We're really kind of treating that as the primary building here, whereas the new building will become a little bit secondary to it in a sense. Next slide. So this is a view. This is the basically a similar view to what was the exact same view actually we showed you initially, which had the or last year, which showed the 44 in place, but this is actually showing it with the new proposed structure there. So again, the 32 building is the one on the right side, and then you see it kind of looks like there's almost sort of three buildings there to the left. That's actually the one building of the new proposed structure that we've been talking about. Next slide. And so this is a comparison between what we showed you last year. So all the way up the top is essentially what we presented. And then the what we're showing you today is in the center. And then the bottom, what that is it kind of takes the 44 building and sort of ghosts it to give you a sense of what the massing is and superimposes that as to what we're proposing. And you'll see that the 44 building actually is a little bit larger and a little bit taller than what we're proposing now. And again, what we're proposing now will basically be in line with the heights of the existing buildings on the right and to the left. Next slide. And we're not really sure if anyone would be interested in these, but this is just a sample floor plan of the new building showing how we're laying this out with the units. And next slide. And then this is the floor plans of the 32 Pius building. As Eric mentioned, over the last 18 months, we've actually taken this to significant development. We've essentially created construction documents for the 32 building. So we know all about that. And we actually got very close on the 44 building, which is how we were able to determine that it's just extremely difficult and very, very cost infeasible to really kind of renovate at this point. And Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So thanks, Eric. I think that was very specific and on point. We spent a lot of time over the last year working with the community, doing outreach. We've worked with the condominium next door for really, 18 months, 16 months. We've met with Councilman Kraus a couple of times. He's toured the site. We did a brief review at the SSSNA summer picnic this summer. We've gone through the two pre-application meetings with the city, and then this is the second RCO meeting that we're attending. So, and we've been on site. We're pretty familiar with the neighborhood. We're very focused on making sure that everyone is aware of who we are and what we're doing. And so we are engaged with the community as much as we can possibly be. So hopefully that is shown, a very intense interest with making sure the project is going to be the right kind of project for the community.
To build on that a little bit, we intend to own the building and operate it for many years. So we intend to be neighbors of and part of Southside Slopes neighborhood for many years to come, and plan to continue our direct involvement with the community as the building progresses.
So Brad or Thomas, I guess that's kind of, if you want to open it up for questions, or how we're happy to, entertain whatever you guys want to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't see anything in the chat, so I guess we'll open it up if people want to start typing messages in the chat. Unless I did something stupid and it's not enabled.
And it looks like, Brad, there's a raised hand.
I see a raised hand. Okay. That would be Ryan. Let me see if I can unmute. Okay.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Hi. So I was not on the original meeting with you guys back last year, so I'm so happy you guys are doing something with this. I live on Pius Street and I walk past this every day, drive past it every day. So I'm glad that something will be done with the area. I'm sure this was asked before, and I apologize if you've already gone over it. But parking is a huge issue in this part of the slopes, most part of the slopes, I'm sure, but Pius Street being a smaller street, well, width-wise, and a lot of people living on it, it's already pretty tough to find parking. I know you said you have 95 units and then 95 plus parking spaces, and that works for everyone who lives there, but we all know there are visitors for a lot of the time. Is there any plan to have, make sure visitors park in the spots you guys provide, as opposed to coming down to the streets and into the neighborhoods here, where it may take a lot of spots from people who live nearby and don't have a garage or need the spots close to their house?
Paul, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take this one.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Seda. I'm a partner in Abode Realty and Catello LLC with Eric, and I'm kind of the parking guy for our project. So I'll expand on that a little bit more. Our goal, the city would require 95 parking spaces for 95 units. With bicycle parking, that number could drop to as low as 69 or 68 spaces with bicycle parking. Our intention in all of our projects is to try to approach one parking space per bedroom. We don't think we'll get all the way here, but our intent here is to provide between 95 and 100 plus parking spaces for the 95 apartments, which would be almost 50% above what the city is requiring. As far as requiring people to park in the guest parking, I'd say the best way we found it to be is by having short-term parking and other available spaces that are available readily near the entrance of the building. We find that just availability drives that. Availability of guest parking and also availability of overall parking. We don't expect that every bedroom will require a car and a parking space. As we've seen in other units, we try and offer that much. And we find that by offering in the 1 per unit to 1 per bedroom range, which would really be between 95 and 100 plus, that we find that provides enough parking when you consider that not everyone is present at the building at all times and not everyone has a car. And we find that approaching that level, again, between 1 per unit and 1 per bedroom, we find that generally meets the needs of the entire complex for parking. And then just due to availability will provide the incentive for people to use the available parking on site rather than going down to Pius Street.
Yep. And we will have visitor parking on site. So just to clarify that.
Right. That's what I meant to emphasize. Exactly.
Yep.
That would be near the entrance to the building. So we think just sheer number of spaces and accessibility will drive people to use what's most convenient and most available.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. I have one more question, just real quick. The exit ramp that you guys are planning to build, is that planning to come down where the stop sign is just before the Pius Street lofts that are on the right there? I couldn't really tell.
The stop sign is on the near side of the street.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea is, I think the ramp comes down, if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't watched this perfectly. The ramp comes down just after, I believe, the stop sign and the intersecting street. It
Yep.
comes down just
Yep.
there is an empty lot. There's 2 empty lots between the end of the building and where Vasily and Alyssa live. And the parking ramp would exit really probably 2/3 of the way to that open lot area. They own the westernmost third of that open land, and we own the eastern or left 2/3 of the lot.
Yep.
So it would come down just within the 2/3 going east to west of that piece of land.
Yeah,
Which
it's
I
on
believe
it's on
is
it's
on
on
the
screen.
line.
It's on the screen now too, Paul. So
Thanks. Going back to the chat, I see Tracy Myers has a question. So we will unmute Tracy.
Thanks, Brad. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I was having trouble getting in on my phone, so I had to go to my laptop. If you have spent time in the neighborhood, you know that we are a cantankerous and demanding lot. And so I really have to say I'm very dubious about the convenience of you having discovered that the building, the Veronica's Vale building, can't be saved And again, I missed the beginning. So could you please explain that again? Because that seems to me like a pretty fundamental change in this project. And it feels like a bait and switch, to be honest. And I was chair of design and development review in the South Side for 10 years. So I'm coming at this from a good bit of experience, but could you just explain again how you discovered that the building is not structurally sound and why it only happened after you went through this long process of presenting to various neighborhood groups?
Eric, you want me to jump in on this?
Sure.
Sure. The primary driver for the reason why 44 needs to come down is the cost of renovating it from a structure not originally designed for multifamily dwelling to one that we had intended to use for such. And what really drove it was the construction costs and interest rate costs. So economics drove it, and it was further driven by the known structural issues, right? Some of them were known, some of them had deteriorated further as we got into exploring and opening up the building. So it's restorable, yes, but the costs in today's finance marketplace and cost of construction marketplace, those are the two things that substantially changed. The cost of addressing the inefficiency of the building and the cost of addressing the known and evolving structural issues. It was primarily economics that are
Well,
driving
it's
it.
always economics. I mean, it's always economics. You're a developer. That's what you do. You try to make money. But I would just like to suggest that in the future, if you embark on a project like this, that where there's a building that is clearly in distress,
Right.
that you might consult with Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, which is, and I work there, but I'm saying this not, I mean, I'm not promoting my organization. We have dealt with buildings more challenging than this. And, you know, really, I mean, I really want to see this site developed. I was very supportive of the original design, but I think, you know, you really need to be upfront with the community because, I mean, frankly, now a little of my trust is broken because this is such a radical departure. And, you know, you're going to have to rebuild that trust with some people in the community because how do we know you're going to do what you're saying here?
Right.
So
Well, I
it's
guess
just
part of
it's
it
a
is
really important thing in this community.
understood. Well, I'm sorry that we may have diminished our trust with you and possibly others. The intent here was, and it was presented, I think, earlier in the deck, is that the cost of construction between late last summer to now increased by 80%. That really was the driver that drove this decision. So we had done that work originally, but this is an unprecedented period of shortages and increasing costs and shortage of labor and materials. And I think in a more typical time frame, that impact with the addition of financing changes might have been less dramatic, but these were fairly unprecedented times and cost increases and shortages that drove this from being within a range that could have been done to a range that became undoable, right? And we did consult with historical folks and looked at other things. Our general model is to always restore. So we hope we can gain that trust back, but really it was the unknown of all those factors: shortages, rising costs, shortages of labor and materials, and rising costs and rising financing costs. That combined with the inefficiency of 44 and the further deterioration that required more cost to restore. So I understand your concern and your questioning of our motives, but in fact, it was economics, and we'd be happy to share anything further with you from what we've gotten back as far as our cost structures go, but it's cost and efficiency and deterioration that have driven us to where we're at. And I'm hoping we can rebuild that trust.
Well, I don't speak for the neighborhood. I speak for, you know, I'm speaking for myself, but I think we have had experiences where developers said they were going to do one thing and they've done something else, and then we're stuck with the results. So, you know, and I understand all the economics of it. It's a strange period, but, well, I think, you know, you have to expect that you will be closely watched as this project proceeds, and just out of an abundance of consideration for those of us who live here, you know, so.
Yep, I think that's a fair statement. And,
Yeah,
And
Thanks.
don't mean to sound bitchy, but you know, that's where I'm coming
No,
from.
I appreciate your input. I just thought it was helpful to share that these were unprecedented economics along with further deterioration. And I understand we're going to be watched, and I think that's a fair response on your part and potentially the rest of the community's part.
I think Eric had something to,
Yeah, so Tracy, since you might appreciate this because you have some familiarity with buildings. So the assumptions that we made initially were based on what we could see with our eyes and basically dimensions and so forth. As we got more into the project, we actually were able to do more actual, more invasive investigation. So actually going in, testing, measuring, and those kind of things. What we found is that the deterioration in a lot of those floors and ceilings was significantly worse than what we anticipated because we couldn't see it. The other part of it was that we were trying to make assumptions of using more wood framing in order to do the interior walls and so forth. And because the existing structure wasn't basically as solid, and it also wasn't as sort of beefy as we may have expected it, we had to go to a lot of steel. And that structural steel is not only more expensive than wood in terms of just basically the material, but it also has significantly more labor costs associated with it. So that is one of the things that actually kind of contributed also to it becoming a little bit less feasible because of basically us discovering more as we went through it. We absolutely try to basically go in and do everything we can to save these structures. I mean, that was really kind of, I think, what attracted these developers to this project. And so we were able to come up with a way of doing it. But again, it's just the way that we did it. And we've gone back and forth many, many times. We essentially had a contractor pricing this through the entire way through. The initial cost estimates were based on the information that we had at the time. And so that was essentially the initial cost estimate based on the information we had and what we can see and what we can observe and what we can sort of infer was what led to sort of progressing it to the next stage. As we progressed to the next stage, found out more, discovered more, had to change the design and alter things, and the pricing basically changed. That coupled with the additional expenses that Paul was talking about, just in terms of the rising costs of things, is really kind of what pushed it over the edge. This decision to go and look at it as a new building was pretty much the absolute last resort that we had, with all the essentially different of gyrations, iterations, different floor ceiling assemblies. We probably redesigned the top of the 44 building at least 4 or 5 different times in terms of proposing different floor ceiling assemblies, different ways of supporting it. Do we remove a whole portion? Do we add a whole portion? Do we add this? We honestly went through a significant amount of gyrations, and it was extremely, extremely sad for me personally to see that we had reached this point, just because we really tried very hard and we really thought that we came up with a really, great solution for repurposing that. The building itself is just really, really not conducive to being multifamily because of its floor plates. And we did figure out a way of doing it, but again, the way we had to do it was just really incredibly expensive.
Yeah. Thanks, all. We're going to keep moving just to make sure everyone's questions are addressed. I see a couple questions about the status of the Gregory Street entrance. There was some discussion about whether that parking lot will communicate with Gregory Street or not.
I'll take that one. The intended site design, as discussed with the condo, would allow Gregory Street to flow into the condo driveway area, which goes above the lot on the eastern side of our property, and would connect to the parking area behind the condo. So that's what Gregory Street would continue to serve and how it would be connected into the layout. It would not connect to Pius Street, and it would not connect to any of the parking areas of the 46 Pius Street complex, but it would allow walking paths and stairs that connect them, but there would be no vehicular traffic connecting Gregory Street to the lots and parking nor to Pius Street. That would be within the condo parking area.
Okay.
Is there further questions on that, or should we move on to another question category?
I think we can probably move on. Paul, if you have a follow-up, certainly let us know. There was also, while we're talking about Gregory Street, I see a second question about there was discussion initially of a turnaround at Gregory Street. Is anything, Stephen has that? There's no discussion of what's Gregory Street going to look like at the end there? I think that's something that we talked about, perhaps is a concession to those that live up there, was giving them a little bit better way to turn around on Gregory Street. Can we pull that site plan up just so people
Yeah.
can? see
Yeah,
it?
pull us that pen up and let's talk about it, but that land up there is not land that is owned by the 46 Pius Street. That's probably a better picture than that. That's probably a better one. Okay. So as you can see on the left side, you'll see the entrance in from Gregory Street. It's just under the yellow box, right? That would come in. We have granted that corner there that would allow a full width entrance into the condo area. But right now that turnaround exists, I believe, in two different capacities. One, there is a gravel lot just before the entrance to the gate on the south side of Gregory Street. And then there is additional space, within the parking area that is utilized and managed by the condo that could be extended. I don't know the exact use of that gravel lot that's at the end of Gregory Street, right? And whether that's considered a turnaround or whether that's considered private property that's not available for turnaround. I see others.
I think it depends on who you ask. It depends on who you ask.
Yep. I know Bill that lives across the street from that lot, and his wife used that with their red SUV to turn around there. They live right on the edge of the parking lot. And I've seen others using it without seeing a lot parking there. I don't know the mechanics of how, to your comment, how that has evolved over the years. But I think there's opportunity there with some other grass area on the south side of the condo drive aisle that could be worked through with the condo association or otherwise.
Got it. While we're talking about parking, I do see a question here about the number of guest spaces versus the number, like if they're dedicated guest spaces, or just can you reiterate what the parking to unit count is and if there are any dedicated guest spaces?
Yes, there will be some dedicated spaces there. Combination of code and practicality. There will be two very large loading areas, and each of those loading areas would accommodate 2+ cars each. And we would expect then that there would be in the neighborhood of a half a dozen visitor parking spaces near the entrance. And then we would utilize other available spaces in the lot for visitors and guests. In addition to that, we would be offering electric vehicle charging that would be available in some of the assigned spaces, not to confuse that with your visitor question option, but the idea is we're trying to provide other amenities that would be viewed as beneficial to the residents and the environment.
Thanks. I know Denise Hartman has had her hand up, so I will ask her question. I will let her ask her question. If she can unmute.
Hi, I have a question about your revenue model. Are you going to be charging people extra for parking when they move in, or will that just come with the apartment? And go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going with your question.
No, well, I was just going to ask a follow-up about Gregory, but answer this question and then I just have a quick
That's fine.
follow-up.
I'll answer the question. Parking will be billed separately from rent. So for those individuals, and we would assign or make available one parking space per apartment initially. And then there would be the possibility for those that may need incremental to be able to purchase or rent additional parking spaces. The short answer is parking will be specifically billed for. We find that generally has people only require a parking space when they need it. And
Yeah.
not require it or leave cars there or have friends leave cars there or whatever other instances would be the case. So we find the model of a small fee for parking to be critical to effective parking management.
Yeah, I agree.
And if
And
there
then
was sufficient- I'm sorry, and if there was excess parking, we would be open to making them available to others in the neighborhood, but we would need some time to validate that was the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the only downside to that is, short of us going to residential parking permit, people could park on there's nothing that keeps people from parking on Pius Street right now. and saving.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's city parking. It is what it is. And no one up here really wants to have to get the city parking permits, because I think they only give one per household. And if you have 2 cars, it's bad. I have a question about, just a quick question about Pius, because I didn't understand your answer. So you're saying that vehicular traffic will not be able to go to or from Gregory?
To or from Gregory Street to Pius Street. Yes, that will be in and out of Gregory to the condo and in and out of the apartment building parking lot to and from Pius. With a
Oh,
one-way.
okay. Okay, good. But you will still have the pedestrian walkway.
We would have
Okay.
a pedestrian opening planned for at least one location, probably 2. for
Oh,
pedestrian
okay.
traffic.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you very much. And
Yep.
thank you for doing this project. I'm glad that you guys are doing a good job up there. Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing, just to comment, the existing staircase that runs down the extreme east side of our parking lot, which is on the far left black line, there is an existing staircase.
Yeah.
It does connect from Gregory down to Pius. That will stay and remain. And then there would be additional ways to walk
Mhm.
through the complex and down one of the ramps or the stairs in front of the building if you're walking from Gregory Street.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we just unmuted Peter Kruthmeyer. You have a question?
Yeah, hi. First off, understand the economics of how difficult it is to save a building that doesn't have the right floor to floor for what you want to use it for in this new environment. A year passed, a year and a half passed, what it used to be. So we're up against that kind of thing too. So I kind of get that. I'm curious though, if you've investigated any way of incorporating the existing school as artifacts or portions of the facade or something like that. Is that in the realm of possibility in your pro forma? So that's one question.
Maybe Eric can talk to that.
Yeah, Peter, are you referring to like kind of keeping materials left over or actually keeping things in place?
Well, man, if you could keep the whole facade, that'd be
Yeah.
fabulous. But looking at your site plan and all the other operations you probably have going on, I don't know, that's a question. So
Yeah, I mean, we thought about it. And so in terms of keeping the facade in place, that was one of the first things we actually began to think of, was either keeping the facade or even a portion of 44 in place and kind of replacing the rest. That ended up creating probably even more, like in some cases, probably more logistical headaches than even just basically, than trying to renovate it in some cases. So it really wasn't feasible for what we could see. And it was largely because in the front of the building, there's classrooms to either side, but then the entire center is essentially the stairwell that goes up and down. So there's really no levels there. So you basically have to kind of gut the entire center, level the whole thing out. And then those levels are still not lined up with the rest of the building. So it becomes really challenging to kind of basically create something new that's behind it. And we sort of have to support the entire thing. Now, in terms of actually trying to reclaim or reuse any of those things like brickwork and so forth, that's absolutely something that we would be considering doing for the future one, to see what we could actually possibly salvage. We know there's actually some stonework and so forth that are in there. We're not really sure how many bricks we can necessarily do, but we would definitely be open to try to retain some of those kinds of things incorporated in some way, in some meaningful way, either into the facade or as part of the interior of the new building itself.
yeah.
There are a lot of great details on it, and
Oh,
it's a fantastic building. I love it. I've studied it a lot, and the proportions are really wonderful, and it's really a shame. So anything we can do to kind of retain as much of it as possible, we absolutely want to try to do.
No, I get that. Yeah, it's the stuff that breaks an architect's heart.
Right. Right. Yes, very much so.
There is that really cool lintel over I can't remember if it's a lintel or some kind of carved stone that has the text in German.
Yep.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, if you could hang on to that, that'd be great. The other comment.
George Kraus mentioned that to me last week. So
All right.
the way we could make that into an artifact on the property or some form, it's something we could consider doing, and it preserves a very specific and directed, unique aspect of the building if it can be cut or preserved in some reasonable manner.
I don't, yeah, that would be super cool if you could. The other comment I wanted to make was on this series of parking spots diagonal next to Pius Street. If you could flip to the perspective rendering for a sec. No, yeah, that one. One thing that popped out at me, and maybe, you know, I get that it's in schematics right now, but I'm just thinking about all those cars, you know, a whole series of cars as you're driving down Pius Street and kind of looking up, would probably want to be screened.
Yeah,
For two reasons.
they will
One-
be screened. We don't have that in this rendering, but there's
Yeah.
screening and requirements from
Okay,
the, from
because
city.
not only for the view from Pius Street, but for the folks who live across the street, so
Absolutely.
having headlights in their bedroom windows all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't have it in the set, but we have we based kind of a frontal view, which ended up showing those within there. But yeah, but the idea is that we'd screen the edge of the ends of those parking spaces across the whole thing.
Great. And I guess my last comment would be, and this is a perfect drawing to look at. I can kind of see what you're doing in reconstituting the sort of tripartite of the school. And then you have this sort of filler piece in between the school and I don't know what you would call the long block. I forget the street numbers. You've been referring to them as street numbers.
32, they were on the right.
Yeah, yeah. But if you're going left to right in this image, like, you know, there's a tan thing and then a space and then another tan thing, then a space and then this other tan thing. That one, it just feels like massing wise, it's trying to be both. I'm wondering if it might it might want to be something other than what's on the left or on the right.
Right. Yeah. It's
an identity question there. So
yeah, I had the exact same thought, Peter. And so for the purpose of this sort of massing, we're just kind of showing it and being kind of more the more obvious solution, which is to kind of make it brick. And so the character of the we didn't get into this, but essentially what we're proposing currently is that the window proportion sizes are basically taken from 32. They're almost the exact same.
oh, I see that. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And then that center portion was the idea that it'd be something that maybe just a little bit different than what's on the left or right. But right now it kind of reads a lot like what's on the left and right. And so that would be kind of something that would happen in a sort of further stage of development. But the other thing we did also is that we kind of wanted to try to keep that centerpiece as something that would create a break between the old and new in a sense. And so it is deliberately set back very slightly. And it's also there would be a rooftop deck on that portion, which allows us to kind of have that massing sort of stop a little bit in the break between these sort of two things we have on the side.
I get that. I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe it wants to be a lot different than it is in this presentation. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Peter. Yeah, I agree. I love that glass connector between the two buildings the other time. But while we are talking materials, is there any, and maybe this is a Thomas question as much as anything, you know, we're being asked to support sort of a zoning question when I think the materiality and the massing of the building and things like that, the contextual, you know, brick, is there any way to codify that so that we don't get VE'd to something that is not as appropriate given the context of the building? I mean, the brick looks fantastic, but I know enough about construction to know how the VE process works.
Is that question directed at the city or is it directed at the,
I guess a little bit of both. I mean, I know you guys can say, yes, we are going to try to maintain that. I guess the question would be, does the city, we talked about the CDAP, the design review. What is the process? What is the developments team commitment sort of on the record to that materiality? And then I guess, how does the city make sure that actually happens? Because I do think it's important to the success of the project from a view standpoint. I mean, we've seen a lot of really ugly things proposed. Part of the hillside district and part of the hillside zoning was the view of the project is as important as the view from the project. So I want to, I think that's important to bring up when we talk about variances, use variances in hillside zoning.
Thank you, Brad. And I think from the city side, I mean, I'm so right now I'm taking notes on this and capturing the kind of highlights of community comments and questions. And so that's something I can pass along to staff as they look at the kind of developing urban design targets. I think that process does take a bit of its own form and based on the CDAP process, but it's something I could pass along to fellow staff.
We did make changes based upon the zoning input or the pre-application meeting last year. We were originally an all glass design. We had modified that based upon the pre-application meeting to something which is not all glass. They were more interested in, say, it was too corporate. So we kind of toned it down and made it a combination of panel and glass.
Even just the connector.
Yep, last year.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that connector, but what do I know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
they-
there you
they-
go. Always in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
Right, like they specifically said it was too much like an office. So we adjusted it from what we had.
Fair enough. We'll continue with the questions. So a couple of them are all the same. Denise says we have a turnaround now. I think we talked about that turnaround at the back of Gregory Street. M. Sire wanted to speak about the aesthetics of the building that they weren't thrilled with. Let me see. Can't get Zoom to raise my hand. Parking, bill resident separate. I'd save the separate parking charge and park on street will add to parking issue in the slopes. So that was M. Sire's comment. Tracy.
That's good. Yeah.
Aesthetics.
I just want to jump in and I mean, I feel really strongly about this and anybody who's been on design review in the neighborhood or is interested in design, I think would say the same thing. We do not want this building to look like every other residential multifamily building that is popping up all across the city. I mean, it's, the new buildings are kind of like the 21st century version of the ticky-tacky house in, post-war America, like everything looked the same, maybe a little variation in materials. But I mean, for example, I can't tell if the bricks are in the new building, if the brick is the same color in all three masses or, pieces of it. But, the existing building, there are clearly two different colors of brick. So, whatever you can key off of, I mean, this can't be generic. It's not that, the South Side has housing types that no other part of the city does, but we really don't need this to be just another, another 5/1 or whatever those things are called, with the same materials that you see all over the city now.
Thanks, Tracy. So Ryan talks about parking, and I'm inclined to agree with him as a resident of Pius Street. If you're charging extra for parking, everyone's first is going to take the street spaces versus the parking spaces. So I might be tempted to revisit that.
Yeah, I appreciate the input, and we can always make it a required charge, but it will be a separate charge because
Yeah.
there will be cases where people may want an existing space. And I really think it's a matter of how well we investigate and encourage people that have cars to utilize the available parking and to keep the parking priced in a manner that doesn't overly deter them from using.
You get the gist.
Yep.
Okay. Did I miss anyone? It looks like I think I tried to find everyone. Sorry, it's easier said than done to do this on the fly.
I'll ask a question of Eric Booth just to see, Eric, if you think it would help. Is there any more explanation of the CDAP process or the design review process that you think this group might benefit from than we've already given today?
Yeah, so essentially what this will do, this will go in front of an internal design review that the administration will do, and then they'll issue their comments. And then this will then go to CDAP. And so CDAP stands for the Contextual Design Advisory Panel. and it consists of professionals. And then so what they do is they essentially look at this from a design perspective, and they provide feedback back to the city administration. In this case, this does not go to planning commission, so it'll be ultimately the city planning staff and then the zoning administrator that will make the final call as to whether what is presented is consistent. So as we're going through, whatever we basically present in terms of the zoning approval, when it goes through CDAP, that would be what would be expected to be done when it goes to actually apply for a building permit.
Thank you. There's no planning commission for this.
No.
I thought everything in Hillside went to the planning commission.
If it's in the steep slopes overlay, that's
Steep slope. That's
Steep slope, yeah. So
gotcha.
we're
Steep slope is the
actually,
planning commission. You're not in steep slope?
yeah, we're right out. So like it's the steep slope actually hits part of the property, but we're actually not doing any disturbance within that.
Yep. Okay. I'll buy that.
So I have a question about CDAP and the and what precedes in design review, because and I admittedly have not been involved in design review for a couple of years. So, but there have been instances where, you know, the developer is told one thing by one entity, and then it's told something else by, you know, CDAP or somebody else. How are any differences in opinion or recommendations between CDAP and, you know, whoever precedes the city planning, whoever staff, because that is something that really irritates developers when they get mixed messages.
Yeah, and so Tracy, I've been on CDAP now for probably 8 or 9 years, and I have also witnessed this. And there tends to be a lot of different things that go. I mean, ultimately in this case, the city, because the planning commission is not approving, even if the planning commission approved it, ultimately the zoning administrator would need to uphold essentially whatever the planning commission approved. If there's no planning commission, then it basically falls upon the staff and the zoning administrator to make that final call. So CDAP, for example, is not it's not a commission, it is an advisory board. And so it is only advisory to the city administration. It doesn't actually have any power in and of itself. It's basically providing comments to the city. So it is often that even in a CDAP meeting that you could basically have 3 different opinions. One person may say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And another person may say, this is the most terrible thing I've ever seen in my life. The city has to be the one that actually determines what of those things that they are going to enforce and require. It is not, it's a very frustrating and it's not an exact process. And I've also seen situations where what has gone through planning commission does not also end up to what's built. And
Yeah.
why is that? Because at some point something was changed. And so there is a trust factor there.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That is the case. It's
Yeah.
not as exact as it probably should be.
I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to just ask another one if that's okay, if you can humor me. Does Abode have any other similar scale projects in the city around to point to? Paul, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Not of this scale in the city of Pittsburgh
Okay.
area.
All right. I think I got everyone. I'll give it a second. If I missed anyone, raise your hand so I can find you. All right. Well,
I'll add one kind of closing comment. We were before this group a year ago. We've come back around as soon as we realized that we had a challenge to overcome. And our intent is to finish this project. And we are going through the process to work with the neighborhood and the city to see it through. I know other developers have looked at this in the past and hit the hurdles and not pursued it further. You know, our intent, we think, with involvement and collaboration with the neighborhood and the city is where we are hoping and expecting to find a good path forward that works and will allow us to remove the blight and to add the vitality to the neighborhood.
thanks, Paul. And we do appreciate your willingness to work with the neighborhood association. Okay, so Thomas put some information in the chat. So I think that we should refer to that, the zoning board at pittsburghpa.gov. I see Ed Jacob had some historical, Angels Arms has 23 2-bedroom units and 60 on-site parking spaces. Other than that, I don't think we have anything else. Thomas, are you good?
I think one just quick question is, have you, for the applicant, have you confirmed the ZBA hearing date?
I believe it's in mid-October, but I'm not sure the exact date.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I believe, just to add a little more, I believe it may be the 13th of October, but we are waiting for final confirmation of that. So that would be just after 30 days from tonight.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right.
One real quick, but I think significant. Stephen asked construction. Can you talk about construction access? Will it be your new road? I think now that you're not connecting to Gregory, everyone in Gregory was like breathing a sigh of relief.
Sure. The intention is to start really site work from the western side of the project, which would be the exit ramp of the finished project. And that would be the initial means of access to both renovating 32 and removing and building 44. Shortly after the western exit from the property is created, the site work will progress and create the entrance on the eastern side of the property, but the western side will be the primary. And our expectation is that a vast majority of the work will be done with access to and from Pius Street, though in the early days and stages, there may be some limited access from Pius Street, from Gregory Street.
Yeah, be careful with your dump trucks. There's a sinkhole in front of my house.
Yep.
The city just poured a bunch of asphalt in and walked away from.
Yep. We're trying to keep the bigger trucks all going from Pius.
Yeah.
I've hit that sinkhole.
So,
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion, and I appreciate everyone's commitment to our neighborhood.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
You guys all good. Hey, Kitty, what are you doing?